All right, greetings and salutations. My name is Ryan McNeil. Welcome to the cast for 2015, for the cinematic year of 2015. We have never come up with a better name for this podcast, but
the bar is open.
But the bar is open, so we're sticking with it. It's an annual get-together where critics, movie lovers, and Lightbox Lounge lurkers get together and talk about the films that we love the most in the year.
Our founder is shaking his head.
Yeah, our founder's shaking his head, even though that's his wording of it. Yeah, I'm going to pass you immediately to our moderator. James McNally will be moderating this little discussion. So, James, take it away. And
everything in moderation, right?
Everything. That's what they say.
Okay, so welcome. It's 2016, and we're here to talk about the films of 2015. A little bit of housekeeping. The way that we do these awards is that we get people to submit their top 10s from the year, and every film would have had a theatrical release in Toronto or a festival screening. And this year we had 41 ballots, 30 male and 11 female. Sorry, my math is terrible. So that was more than I think any time in the past. So we're growing, and that took me a lot longer on my Excel spreadsheet on New Year's Eve, but here we are. This is the sixth awards, and I want to just quickly go over what won in previous years, just for interest's sake. So our very first cast awards were for the year 2010, and the number one film that year was Inception. And well, I won't go into more detail, but that was our film for 2010. 2011, the winner was Drive. 2012, our winner was Moonrise Kingdom. 2013 was Her. 2014, last year, was Boyhood. And this year, well, we'll just have to wait until we get to that number one spot. What I'm going to do is we're going to go count down from our top 10 backwards, and we'll go around the table, and we have 7 really smart people here to talk about the film, so I'm not going to talk so much, hopefully. I'm going to have us go around the table. Everybody just quickly introduce yourself and maybe your outlet or your Twitter handle, whatever you would like to say.
My name is Dave Voigt. I'm editor and publisher at InTheSeats.ca. You can find me at InTheSeats on the Twitter, as well as the Pop Culture Poet.
I'm Corey Pierce. I host Soundtrack of Your Life on Row3.com. I'm the only Row3 person this year. That's weird.
I moonlight there.
All right.
I'm Hillary Butler. I write for liveforfilms.com. You can find me at Pet Doc Hill because I'm a veterinarian in my day job, so I don't have a film handle.
We can work on that. I'm Ryan McNeil from the Matinee.ca and the Matineecast.
Corey Tad from Things.
From life in general.
From Things.
I've written stuff in places. Nowhere currently.
Where are you on Twitter?
Corey Tad. There you go.
Norm McGlashan from Flick Hunter, writer-editor, and I also do some work with some other sites here and there. And at McStay12 is where you find me on Twitter.
I'm Jorge Castillo, writer for the Prairie Dog magazine and Planet S magazine in Regina and Saskatoon, respectively. And my Twitter handle is J.I. Castillo. At least the one I can tell people about.
And can I just add that in case you hear a sarcastic remark and faded in the background, it's our bartender, Bob Turnbull, who's doling out the drinks today. So.
That's it. That's enough from you, Bob. All right, so let's get quickly underway because we have a lot of films to talk about. So I will just give you the intro and the math, and then you guys can talk about what you think of the results. So we'll start with our number 10 film of the year, as voted by our 41 voters, and it's Room. It had 39 points. It was mentioned 6 times. It was chosen as a top film by one of our panelists here, by Hillary. Would you like to start us off, maybe? Tell us what you thought of the film.
Well, I guess I saw Room at TIFF this year, and saw it at the premiere night, which maybe influenced my my rating just a little bit. But it was probably the film that moved me the most over the course of the year, so that's why I picked it. It had a lot of emotion behind it. Brie Larson and her young counterpart in the film absolutely spectacular, and so that's why it made it into my top choice. It's not a perfect film, but it was the one that moved me the most.
How many of the rest of you saw Room?
No, yeah.
Everybody
yeah.
Everybody here, yeah?
Nope.
Except for Corey.
Oh.
And-
Almost everybody here.
Okay, and so where did it fall in the rest of your top tens, if at all? And why?
Well, I might have had it the second highest rank, I think. I had it ranked number 3, I want to say. And I saw it at TIFF as well, in a press screening. And people were emotionally involved in this film. People
At
were-
a press screening.
People were crying. There's a real great scene when they try and escape, and people were holding their breath as this was going on. And it was a very good movie, very well acted. The 2 leads were excellent, and just how the story went was very good, and also the reaction of her parents towards the second part of the movie, and how the mother and father reacted totally differently to her, and the circumstance she was in was also something
Joan
you never would have
Allen
thought
was
about.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very well done.
So I was going to say, did anybody see it not at TIFF? Like
Me,
As a
yeah.
did it? Was
I
it-
skipped TIFF entirely this year.
Oh, okay.
I was
But
that
I'm just
guy.
wondering, you kind of inflate things sometimes. 'Cause you're-
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sort of maybe raised my expectations a bit. But if anything, I was the one guy that was like annoyed at how obviously Toronto it was, and not a small town in Ohio when the CN Tower's in the background of shots.
You didn't like the
Yeah.
Apache Burger reference?
Oh, I never been to Apache Burger. I know Sean.
If you've been in a room
you
for
all-
5 years, I mean, you got to go to Apache Burger,
course.
as soon as you get
Just
out.
digitally remove the CN
Do you all
tower,
know,
like, why would they not have done
Do you all know Amir Sultani?
Yeah.
Yeah. Apparently his old dinner table is in the movie.
Oh my.
Interesting. Okay.
It's not the one in the room, is it?
I don't know, but he went. I haven't seen it, but he went to see the movie with his mom so that they could spot the dinner.
The dinner table.
It was an emotional moment for them.
Yes.
I wonder though how much of this is like. Is there a Toronto bump? Like, is there something like is this more popular locally than outside of Toronto?
Well, it won the People's Choice Award at TIFF.
Yeah.
I know that, but I don't know how it's been doing.
It's doing well. Like, I think it's doing... Best of all, coming out of this seems to be Brie Larson.
Yeah.
The movie itself is being seen as, like, really good. It's not exactly the kind of thing that's being seen as, like, the top achievement of the year or anything like that. In a wide Oscar field, I wouldn't be surprised if it got a Best Picture nomination, because when you've got 9 or 10 slots,
Yeah.
it's the kind of film that seems well at home with everything else that's going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, Brie Larson really is the one thing to sort of pull out of this movie in her
Yeah.
performance. Because, I mean, we at this table have seen Short Term 12 and other things
Yeah.
that she's been in, but this is at least one of the first things that's gone a little more wider and sort of brought her skills sort of to a wider audience. And it was a fantastic performance.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's, again, we as a group sort of get a label of being a little cynical. And, I mean, just to go back to Norm's point, like, this is a movie that de-cynicalizes anybody.
Yeah.
And she's really pushed herself into the sort of almost like Michelle Williams role.
Yeah,
as current crop
yeah,
actress.
I would say that, yeah.
Anyways, it'll be a nice mashup with like Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt music. Once,
Oh my god.
I find it interesting because I do believe there is a degree of Canadian fog in this film, considering this telefilm production in the Control.
yeah.
And for example, the Vancouver Critics Circle, I vote with them because Saskatchewan doesn't really have a critics circle. There's not that many.
That's a crime.
I know.
You are the critic circle, man.
I basically, yeah. No. But anyway, what I was going to is that we had to put Room in both categories, as a Canadian film and as an international film. So that made me wonder if is there a degree of do we feel too close to this movie to actually judge it
I think
objectively?
there's some homegrown pride there. Like,
It's actually
I,
funny,
for,
this
for
film
me,
and I think Brooklyn are both Canada, Ireland,
co-production.
Co-productions.
co-productions, and there might be other countries, but I was surprised in a way that those that seems to be more and more common now, that they're big films, but they're being co-produced by like 3 or 4 countries.
Got to split the bill somehow, man.
Yeah. Are we? Does anyone have anything else to say about Room?
I think we can move on.
I want to introduce. Sorry, we have a latecomer. Heidi Morales is here. Would you like to just tell us quickly who you write for, where your Twitter handle is?
Hi everyone. I think I know most of you maybe virtually and some of you in person. I write for myself primarily, and I do occasionally write for Dave, who's here, and a couple of other pals based in Toronto.
Where can people find you on Twitter?
Heidi Mo.
Nice.
With that one.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our 9th film, which is Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. Finished with 40 points, so just 1 point ahead of Room. It was mentioned 6 times, also like Room, and it was chosen first by one of our voters, David Baldwin, who's not here. But how many of the people at the table have seen the film? So maybe half?
I had this one really, really high.
Okay, so maybe you want to start us off.
Yeah, I think it might have benefited in voting from getting on home video like halfway during the year, which is how I saw it. And not to get too personal, but there's like a very sort of easy way for me to project onto this film. And increasingly towards like the very end, I think it has an year with like a number of emotional moments. There's a thing towards the end that kind of speaks to how well you really know somebody, and it just absolutely crushed me. I guess it's also kind of an analog to last year's Fault in Our Stars, which is a bit more young adult oriented, and this is a bit more kind of cinephile-ish, even though it has kind of a lot of quirky elements that might push people away. But the presentation of everything is just like fantastic. I'm not so sure that it's going to have necessarily like a lot of legs, like it's going to grow on home video beyond what it already has, but
It's the first film, isn't it, from the director?
I think so.
Actually, no, that's not true, because it's the same guy who did the Talented at Sundown remake that played at Toronto After Dark last year. It's a guy. This guy is sort of. He's done a lot of TV. He's got a couple of features under his belt now, and I mean, if anything, it's an impressive film, just at least from my perspective, because it's a guy who can do a lot of different stuff and not sort of miss a beat. So.
Okay, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's a regular director for American Horror Story.
That's right. Yeah.
Particularly the first season, basically the good season.
Yeah.
So is he more, he's been a genre sort of guy, and this is maybe a crossover?
A little bit, yeah, I would say so.
I know it played at Sundance. It played very well at Sundance. I think it might have picked up.
I thought it's won some of the awards at Sundance,
Yeah, someone
which
spent a
can
lot
be
of
a
money.
blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
Whoever distributed it like paid a big chunk of money on it.
Probably
So,
Fox.
hopefully, maybe some money back. Anybody else have any opinion on the film?
I wasn't crazy about this. Was the first time I actually felt I'm too old for this movie, which is kind
First
of
time?
Yeah, actually, because like I'll go into a movie and I'll see how a younger me could have liked it more, or younger audiences will like it even more.
Yeah.
This is the first time I thought, younger me would have really dug this.
Yeah.
Would have really, really dug this. This is the first time I was like, no, not. It wasn't doing it for me.
Well,
Mostly from a technical side, actually. Like the emotion is all there, even if I think it kind of sort of cheats. The technique was what kept pulling me out of it. Of every time it would shoot wide angle or shoot low or shoot high or shoot at a Dutch angle, and I kept thinking in my head, you've got a boring shot that you've just thrown onto a Dutch angle. It's kind of like one of my early mistakes in photography was my first experience with a fisheye lens, and I'd have a boring shot and I'd think, hey, let's just throw the fisheye lens on. Well, now you have a boring shot, but you just see more of it.
Are you sure you're not talking about the new Tom Hooper movie?
I'm not talking about the new Tom Hooper movie,
Or the
but
Quentin Tarantino.
well, maybe that. But that was this was I wanted to like this a lot more than I did, and part of me thought if I'd come to this film younger, I might have dug it a lot more.
I'm very happy that I'm still always able to kind of tap into my angry teenage side of me, and that
so
it seems
am I,
like
but-
every year there seems to be something that's kind of filled this sort of need to be a new Breakfast Club kind of position, whether that's something like Perks of Being a Wallflower, for example, which also I think similar to this had a lot of love for it, but it only went to a certain level, either financially or size of audience. But every year there's something like this that kind of comes along that it'll be 15 years. It'll be really? This is the stuff that a generation remembers and holds forward?
Yeah.
Whether that for us might be the Goonies, which is completely different entirely. But and I really appreciate that there's still kind of stuff like that. And also this year there was Paper Towns, which I thought was kind of underrated. So
was this film aimed at a young
It's based on
adult
a YA
audience?
book, so
Yeah.
start
Okay.
there.
I think it's aiming more adult in film presentation. If anything, it kind of reminded me a bit of 500 Days of Summer in the kind of style of kind of quirk that it was kind of going for.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely an emotional level that is reaching towards a certain age group that is going to remember it more than dozens and dozens of so-so comedies that come and go.
Yeah. Okay, it's good. I think it's interesting that you said that film, that you spoke about that film moving you, and Hillary, you spoke about Room really moving you, because I think our next film, this is where I'll talk more. Our number 8 film is Brooklyn, which finished with 41 points, mentioned 6 times, and was the number 1 film of me. And I think that's exactly where I came at it from. I think it's interesting that sometimes if you write about film, if you see a lot of film, you can pull yourself out of it a little bit emotionally, because you're noticing shots or direction or editing or things like that. And Corey and I were actually just talking about this on the way over, and I think Brooklyn for me is a very old-fashioned kind of stuffy filmmaking in some ways, but it's gorgeous. It looks gorgeous, first of all, and for me it was resonant because of being an immigrant, and my parents came to Canada in the 60s, but it was only about 15 years after the events that would have happened in Brooklyn, and my parents came from Ireland, and so there's a lot of stuff in there that just moved me, but I also thought it's just gorgeously art-directed, shot. It's a very old-fashioned kind of big film, and you don't see that many films like that anymore, so I guess for me it was a bit refreshing. I don't know, did anybody else see Brooklyn and like it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
loved it.
Did anybody not like Brooklyn? I almost feel bad.
I had
Yeah.
problems with Brooklyn, but I still I
Are
can't
we
say.
talking about the movie or
Look, so too many hipsters there now,
It's
man.
too
Too many barber
expensive.
shops where they want $60 for a shave.
I had
Brooklyn
this
is
peg
just
as-
it's Brooklyn's over.
I had this pegged as being the award season backlash movie, but it hasn't happened.
Well,
Give
what's
it
your
time.
problem with it, Dave? I want to hear that.
Well, basically, I mean, obviously, I love the first basically 2/3 of the film because it really shows off what kind of a talent Saoirse Ronan really is, because she basically carries the damn thing from beginning to end.
And how early we are in seeing that talent, because
Exactly.
she's still so damn
Exactly.
young.
And Emery Cohen, as her love interest, was absolutely fantastic, and they played off each other so very well. My genuine problem with the film is in the third act when she goes home. I find it falls apart. I think it's forced. It feels manufactured and almost kind of phony. Almost kind of put upon of, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, and let's just manufacture something to create a little bit of drama where there didn't necessarily need to be any drama.
It's funny because that's how I felt about a different movie set in 1952 that involves a retail employee.
We'll get there.
We might even get there. Who knows?
I'm not sure Domhnall Gleeson's character got enough time or investment for us to feel invested in that relationship and get that drama
I
going.
agree. I
That's
think the
fair.
trailer sold it as more of a 50-50 proposition,
And it
but
wasn't.
it really wasn't.
But
He gets-
that was actually what I liked about the movie, because from the trailer I was worried that it was going to just be this, like,
Love triangle.
all the melodrama would be about the love triangle, but that's in fact not what the melodrama is. The melodrama is surrounding her being an immigrant, and so when she goes back, I was like, I don't know, it didn't seem to me that she loved, Donald Gleason's character at all. It was just like, this was her way of maybe going back home, and then she kind of snaps out of it. And I was like, this is kind of a perfect, yeah, like you said, old-fashioned, but in kind of the best way. They don't tell stories like that much anymore.
It feels very 1950s MGM, like
Yeah.
right down to the color palette.
Yeah.
Totally,
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I think it works. I mean, just her face. She can just do things with her face without.
Plus, it's just delightful. It's a really delightful, funny movie. I was like surprised, like hilarious movie.
Oh yeah, the whole rooming house stuff is very.
Oh
good.
yeah.
I quite like Brooklyn, but I'm surprised I didn't connect more with it. Like, I immigrated from Chile, I'm married a Canadian. But the part I like about it's actually probably a part of the film that Dave doesn't, which is when I went back to Chile after, I don't know, 8 years living here, the press changes radically the way you see it. And it definitely captures that the right way. It's just the little details, and I appreciate that. It's really, but it's funny enough. It's not a movie I feel passionate about. It's a beautiful movie. But
Well, it's a particular kind of immigrant experience, and I'm sure it's not someone who came here in the last 10 years would probably have the same experience at all. But
Or someone who came here where they don't speak English. It
oh,
would be a
that's
very,
the thing. Yeah,
very different
exactly.
experience,
Like
right?
She's sort of she has it fairly easy, even though it's hard, But she doesn't have to learn a new language or anything like that.
No, but like people forget, there was very, very deep prejudice against English, against Germans, against Irish. Pick the nation, and there was a deep-seated, we don't really want you here.
There was a
right,
Trump.
very, very deep into the
They
20th
put that
century.
in a scene.
Yeah.
But they played it for laughs.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
It's a good thing that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah,
How far we've come.
Yeah. Okay. If we've had our stay on Brooklyn, let's move to number 7, which I think is a very different film from the first 3. It's Denis Villeneuve's Sicario.
Nice little romp.
Yeah. which actually
It's the feel-good movie of the year.
Finished with 58 points, so a significant jump from 8, 9, and 10. It was mentioned 11 times in top 10s. Nobody picked it first overall, but everybody seemed to think it was pretty solid and liked it quite a bit. Anybody want to start us off? Sicario.
I feel like movies like this are getting further and fewer between. Like the studios don't really want to throw a lot of money at this kind of movie because they think people don't go, and to a large extent they're right. But it's a shame because you roll back the clock 30 years or so and go into the late 70s, and a lot of movies like this were being made that were movies for adults that are of adult themes with a larger budget. And it's a shame because you see what somebody like Villeneuve can do when you give him a little bit of money. Not even that much money, but just a little bit of money and say, go make your movie. And, just seeing this movie in his last view, I'm the guy who's looking forward to his version of Blade Runner. Mm-hmm. And also the guy who's really sad that Canada's probably lost him.
Yeah.
Because after
but he was French anyways.
That's Corey Attad. Between a movie like this and Demolition from Jean-Marc Vallée, a lot of Canada's really great not up and coming, but established talent has gone to Hollywood and probably aren't coming back. So that was the bittersweet part of a movie like Sicario for myself.
Sicario reminded me quite a bit of Soderbergh's Traffic, which is a film that I still really, really like. Anyway, does anyone else have anything else to...
Sicario, yeah.
I appreciate the fact that...
Ryan's pointing at things.
Keep going. There we go.
I appreciate the fact that Villeneuve subverts the traditional narrative. We have a protagonist that is phenomenally ineffective, doesn't change a thing, and she is just there, and yet you still are compelled by her.
Well, that's the whole drama, right? Is that she thinks that she's there to have an effect, and then it turns out that's not. She's just there to be there.
Yeah, she's covered.
She's covered.
Yeah.
It's true. It is a lot like Traffic. It's sort of like Traffic meets like Silence of the Lambs. It has sort of the structure of a Silence of the Lambs. Has the same or similar dynamic with sort of the lead female character with all these men surrounding her all the time. And the ending, there's that sequence going in, with the night vision. It's kind of similar. I thought it was great.
Some people thought it was just too cynical. I mean, I did not. I felt that was completely earned. It was realistic, but some people are like, oh, it's so cynical, I don't like it. Well, what is there not to...
I could watch it just for the construction of that border scene alone. That is execution of action and tension at its highest level.
Yeah.
And
it's not overdone.
Beacons,
It's just
yeah.
The tension is there without there having to be a ton of gratuitous stuff.
Well, I mean, and it speaks to the way movies are getting divvied up as well now, because there's the ones that you make for $1 million or $2 million over here. Then there's that middle pack in the 10 to 30 million range, and then it's the 9-figure go blow your brains out blockbuster kind of thing, and there's nothing really in between. And there's a market not only for audiences but for filmmakers like a Villeneuve, like a Vallée, to get those 20, 30 million to just go make whatever the hell they want, because it's going to find an audience. It's going to make its money.
Remind yourself that Spielberg's movie this year was made for $40 million.
Exactly. That's exactly,
Well, The Walk was made for, $20 million or something?
Yeah.
Something crazy. The Walk is a huge effects movie, and that was made for
$20 million bucks.
No money. Granted, it only made $4 million. But,
The Walk was this year?
Yeah.
That movie does not appear anywhere.
Yeah.
just to let you know.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, there's only one good part in the movie, and it's the end of the movie.
And it's The Walk, yeah.
Yeah.
It was cheap because they didn't hire a screenwriter.
Yeah.
So are we done? Sicario? That's...
I can say that I basically put me to sleep on the first watch. Like Enemy, so did that. But I kind of force-fed Enemy on a second watch and ended up respecting it more. And I have that basically coming with Sicario as well.
So
It's been pre-ordered.
Yeah. Okay, number 6. This is a film that finished top of our TIFF poll, but hasn't actually had a proper release yet. So, Anomalisa, the Charlie Kaufman film, with 69 points, mentioned 10 times, and was the topic of 2 of our voters, neither of whom are here. What are your thoughts?
Who saw it? Oh,
So
okay.
really just
3 of us only?
I had to
Wow.
resist watching the screener because I can't. Not for that one.
You need to. This is one that really lends itself to distraction. And a lot of the films that are going to come up ahead of it are films that I feel aren't going to play the same if you don't turn down the lights in your living room, put your phone on the other side of the room, and just zero in. If you can't see it in a theater, because they're very low boil, nuanced movies. And this one especially, because like a lot of the emotion in it, that's all coming out of puppets, first of all, is very, very subtle. And I feel like if you're half watching it, if you're kind of watching it with one eye on your Twitter feed, you're going to miss a lot of these subtleties. Right down to the fact that it actually took me a while to get into Tom Noonan doing all the voices that are not David Thewlis or Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Right. Yeah, it's just that it takes a while to get used to that. That you start watching it, and you're there watching the screen, and you see what's going on, and then you start to realize it takes a bit of time that all the characters are the same person except for a couple different characters. Mm-hmm. So you have to get used to that, and then so he gets the impression that everybody's exactly the same. And there's a good running joke in the beginning about how great the chili is in the town that he's visiting, which goes on and keeps coming back a third time. And then he's doing his regular job, and everyone's exactly the same, and then he hears a voice that's different, and the whole movie turns at that point. He's now heard a different voice, and he's got to track down and find out who has an original voice, and that's where the whole movie kind of flips.
It's a movie that the dialogue you really need to pay attention to the dialogue. Pay attention. I found it wonderfully written, which is kind of an overstatement being Charlie Kaufman, but as original voices go, I think we need more Charlie Kaufman movies. It's just so wonderfully written. I'm actually looking forward to see it a second time now that I know the Tom Noonan situation, because I realized that Tom Noonan was doing the whole purpose of what he was doing well into the movie, maybe a half hour into it, which is.
Well, it doesn't help that the first person you see, so the Tom Noonan voices, kind of looks sort of androgynous. So when he's on this plane and he's reading a letter written to him by this former lover of his, and you see this kind of cartoon bubble, and you see the person talking, and the character looks very androgynous. So at first I was like, oh, wait a second, is he like a closeted homosexual who has a wife and a child, and this is like when he goes away, this kind of thing happens? No. It's a woman who Tom Noonan happens to be voicing. And you don't click into that until several scenes later where another woman who's very clearly a woman shows up and is also voiced by Tom Noonan. And Tom Noonan is just doing these very slight differentials on his regular cadence. And it even takes a while before you realize everybody sounds the same. So it throws you at first into what is this guy's deal. It's a very, very basic story of a guy goes away for a conference and meets somebody while he's there. But all sorts of little things just kind of draw you deeper into a very ordinary story.
I mean, it's interesting. This was a Kickstarter-funded film.
Yeah, because it was a play first. Like, they did it like almost like a live read.
It was going to be a short. Like, I funded this like 4 years ago now. And they were like, it's going to be a short. And then it was going to be like, oh, we're going to make it maybe 30 minutes. It'll be about 45 minutes. And then they finally decided we're going to make this a feature. So I hope it comes out late enough in the year that it is remembered for next year, because I feel like sometimes what happens is the film will open at TIFF. It'll not do well at the end of that year. It'll open up early, like February, March, and the year after, and then it'll be forgotten again by the end of the year.
That's when it's coming out.
It's coming Friday.
Let's try to remember this. If it's memorable. But
And it is such a festival movie. It's not a movie you can Netflix and chill to. It's a movie you can shut off the world to.
Yeah. Same as Sicario and Brooklyn. A lot of these movies are that kind of movie where you got to zero in.
Well, let's keep moving. Let's keep our ears open for Annalisa. Number 5, Spotlight, which finished with 92 points, so another jump from 6th place up to 5th. 14 mentions. Nobody picked it number 1. So Spotlight's a film that got a ton of love, I think, during our TIFF. awards, and it's still getting a ton of love, but nobody picked it as their top film.
I know Hillary really
That
liked it.
surprises me. Yeah, I put it as number 2, so it was close.
What did you dig about it?
The acting in it's phenomenal. Mark Ruffalo is great. Michael Keaton's great. Rachel McAdams is
Great
good. Like
ensemble,
just
right?
Yeah.
like as an ensemble piece, they fit together really well.
This and The Big Short are going to be the ensemble.
Yeah. Which I could talk about that movie too, but but like how phenomenal was that, and engaging, a story. These reporters were this is a real life story. It affected so many communities and people. It was just really well put together. I loved it at TIFF.
This is like one of the only ones in the top 10 that to me feels like a Best Picture candidate, like as like a true threat.
Yeah.
I know there are certain other ones in the conversation out there, but to me this one seems more like the zeitgeist movie of the year, both in terms of the state of journalism, and as well I think people right now, I think we're taking kind of like a perverse enjoyment in being disappointed and horrified by our institutions. And in this case, it's the Catholic Church, but I mean, you've got Making a Murderer, the Justice Institution, and as well as combining both like journalism and that sort of shaking your head thing, the rise of Serial and the Jinx, and sidebar, blah, 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 outrage culture, blah, blah, blah. Like we all kind of take some sort of enjoyment in shaking your head and feeling a bit superior, but not kind of like some of the characters in the movie realizing your own kind of culpability and everything that happened.
Right. That was, to me, the really impressive thing about that movie was the way that it, the outrage at the institution is sort of foregone. Like, we know the story already, so we know that we're already angry at the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
The movie kind of plays with that a bit, but it really smartly kind of brings in the character's connection to the Catholic Church and the extent to which they've kind of let things slide. There's the great scene near the end with Michael Keaton, of course, but there's earlier when they go see what's his name from Big Fish, Billy Crudup.
Right.
When they go see him like that last time, and he's like, "I sent you this years ago, and you ignored me." And it's like a gut punch where you're just like, "Oh yeah, this was the problem."
He says he's like,
it was
I'm either going to
us.
write this story or I'm going to write the story of you covering
Right,
this up.
right,
Pick
right.
one.
Right.
This is one of the few things I saw multiple
Love it.
times in the theater, including with my dad, who was like, I consider one of those people who just is always wrestling with the idea of faith and everything. And the scene that really punched me, especially the second time, was when Mark Ruffalo was talking about how like I always thought I was going to be able to go back.
Yeah.
And I just can tell that's like a thing with a lot of people out there is there's usually like a roadblock. Not that I'm not a religious person whatsoever, but I think a lot of people have that kind of resignment to returning to things that they had abandoned, and then something comes along that says like, no, your path is moved on from this. Like that's not an option anymore, and that hurts.
It's funny. It's a movie of moments. Like the one moment that for me stay with is when the Ryan Darcy James character realizes that there's a residence for pedophile priests around the corner, and he runs in that direction and sees it's right there. It's happening. It's just a few meters away from where your children are playing.
And then he puts the picture on his fridge of the
Don't go.
do not go anywhere near that place to all his kids.
And yet, it's not exploitative emotionally.
No.
Which is something I really appreciated because it could easily have gone.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a different way to make this movie that would have also been like a big Oscar contender.
It would have been all
It would
Mark
have-
Ruffalo's
Yeah. It would
have been-
yelling speech, which is what gives that scene so much power.
Is
it's
that
the
it only
only,
happens,
the only time somebody yells in the whole movie.
It would have been all that.
It would have been all that,
It
yeah.
would have been multiple scenes of kids talking about what happened to them, which you don't get at all. You have a couple of adults, and even then, so they go into a bit of detail, but so much of it is just, like you said, it's not exploitative at all. It's really impressive.
And it speaks to the strength of the whole piece because, I mean, there really isn't a lead.
Yeah.
There isn't Mike Keaton, Mark Ruffalo, and then everybody else.
Right.
It's a team effort. It's everyone pushing forward on this issue together and sort of what happens to this team and the results that come out of it. And it's heartbreaking, and it's like you say, it's a gut punch. I mean, because it works that well.
See, that's my question on it too for the Golden Globe nominations. I'm pretty sure Mark Ruffalo's up for Best Actor for that. And when I saw it, I said, he's going to be Best Supporting Actor for sure. So how do they decide who goes where?
Golden Globes is a bit of a crapshoot anyway because they're all kind of weird in general.
So the Martian's up for comedy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as an example. But like if you're going forward into Oscar season, then I'd say Ruffalo is a supporting player just because of his nature on the team. Basically, like you'll see him in a few weeks as best supporting actor instead of best lead. It comes down. You're actually tapping on something that has come up a lot this year in terms of what category actors are put forward in, because that's really controlled by the studios and the PR reps.
Exactly.
In terms of where they think an actor has the best shot.
Right.
When we get to another film, I'm going to mention that again.
Yeah, there's two films coming up.
Yeah.
It's really at the forefront where it's how is this person a supporting actor when they're in almost every scene.
Right.
Exactly.
It's just they've been in the industry for a little bit less time.
Yeah.
Or you think they stand a better chance down here.
Right.
Just to clarify something, Ruffalo is nominated for the Golden Globe Best Actor for Infinitely Polar Bear. not
Yeah.
Oh,
for,
really?
That's
So,
right.
so
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
that might be
Right.
where you're.
Spotlight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Did he get Spotlight as well? Like, is he a double?
No,
I
it's
don't
no,
know.
just
So just Infinite Polar Bear.
Okay.
Okay.
Never
And,
heard of it.
and can I just say that this makes me thankful that Tom McCarthy got the cobbler out of his system so we could get Spotlight, get two Spotlights.
See, people ask me why I saw The Cobbler at TIFF. I'm like, well, because the guy makes good movies. I didn't even really read what it was about. I just thought I'd like to, now I'll go again based on his name. Now that he's past that.
Maybe that was part of the reason why he's like, I gotta make this less.
Well, I got to talk to him at TIFF. He's like, I don't care if nobody likes it. I just wanted to make a weird movie.
He was also here in
I
Toronto.
wanted to
I'm
make
fine
a
with
weird little
weird,
movie.
but weird and good are not mutually
Well, yeah,
exclusive.
there you go.
You know?
He was also here in Toronto prepping to shoot
For Spotlight that year, yeah.
while he was at the festival. So like, it
For
was
Cobbler,
already
that's right, yeah.
going.
Must be weird than doing interviews for that. And he's like, I'm doing something completely different.
Yeah, it's like, just don't worry about this one. I'll get you on the next one. It's good. It's
Back to Dave's point about Spotlight, like being not about one person in general, and neither is The Big Short, which I know is like I think you're number one,
Yeah, it
right?
was, yeah.
There wasn't really anything this year that was that sort of Oscar bait, singular person kind of.
Eddie
you know,
Redmayne.
The Danish
Is
Girl.
the Revenant
Oh,
not being
The
talked
Revenant.
Yeah,
The Revenant.
No, but I mean, like, is that a based? That's
Oh,
is that
Carol.
a based on a true story sort of?
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah.
But I mean, like your traditional sort of biopic, like.
Oh, like your Aaron
biopic,
Brockovich
The
kind
Dana-
of thing?
the
Yeah,
Danish
like
Girl.
Capote or something like
The
that.
Danish
That'll
Girl
be
is
your
the one.
closest.
I feel like I feel like Joy was that attempt that did not do well
Yeah, Joy was that.
because Joy is based on an actual person and it's that same kind of Aaron Brockovich, rags to riches.
And it's Jennifer Lawrence and then everybody else.
Yeah,
I don't think we started on the David O. Russell players. We're not going to start that.
But
I mean,
we're not gonna talk about that
discussion.
film because
Yeah.
In general, there hasn't really been one that really
Yeah.
made a dent with large audiences or
Oh no,
critics, really.
no.
Okay, let's move on. Now that we're done with Spotlight, we're up to number 4. I was going to say our top 5 really sort of stood out from the top 10. They were much further ahead. But number 4 is with 99 points is Inside Out. From Pixar, it's got 19 mentions, which is up to this point the largest number of mentions. It has 3 people that chose it as their top film of the year. One of them is with us. Jorge, you can maybe speak to Inside Out first.
Well, Inside Out has a lot to do with the way I perceive movies. Like I certainly can give value to a good film, but then there is a movie who actually triggers something in you that I don't know. It may cause you a visceral emotion of some kind. That puts it a level ahead. And then there is the movie that actually changes the way you think. And that was for me Inside Out. And I am not saying it's changed my life, but what I'm saying is that the approach it has to filmmaking is so interesting because it's from the inside. I'm gonna say this. I can't believe I'm gonna say this.
Do it. You go for it.
It's from the inside of your head. It's just a whole abstraction of the way mind works that it just blew me away. It's just such an amazing feat. It just stood out to me. And I have seen it a couple of times, 3 times with that, and it gets me every time. It works on an emotional and a rational level. So it was really no contest for me. Inside Out was the best movie this year.
You all must have seen it.
Yep.
Heidi, have you seen it? Because you haven't had a whole lot of chance to talk today.
I did. I don't really have the enthusiasm as a lot of other people, but I still enjoyed it. Like it's not in my top 10.
So where did it fall short for you?
Maybe because I work in the field, so I think I've learned to not really be as emotionally attached to some characters with regards to some mental health stuff, but I do think it is really well done. I do appreciate the fact that it brings forth a lot of what's going on in somebody's mind that often a lot of us don't get to hear. But it's, I think I do like the fact that it reached a wider audience.
Was there something that it got specifically right or specifically wrong about mental health that kind of...
I actually heard from a lot of people that I've worked with who actually like the fact that if you get to hear the thoughts,
Yeah.
and that's what people really appreciated. That, of course, we've all had those thoughts, and especially more so somebody who's in that situation and they're living it, and we sometimes just want them to feel better or whatnot. So I think for that reason, I do appreciate that part of the film, and a lot of the people that I've talked to who actually really, really loved it, that's what I think they see as they got it right.
One of the aspects that is not brought up often about Inside Out is that it's a movie that's gender fluid aware,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is
That's an also very
which is
good point.
Yeah.
pretty remarkable for a film that it's allegedly targeting young audience, and it assumes the gender fluidness of it, and yet it doesn't make a big deal of it to
Yeah.
the point that it actually goes by and most people may not even notice about this. But yeah, you have a girl, a 10-year-old girl there for sure. Her sexuality is not fully formed, and of course she's gender fluid. Like, it's so obvious, and yet you don't. It's not brought up as a major plot point.
I think what caught me about it was the way it very succinctly told people there are far worse things to be than sad. Like, yeah, if happiness is missing from your headquarters, as they put it rather nicely, if joy is missing, you're going to feel one way and you're probably not going to feel very happy. But if you take sadness out too, if all you're left with is disgust, anger, and fear, that can get you really mixed up really quickly. So it's not just, if a person is working through depression or working through stress that, they're just sad. No, they're not sad. They're something that's far more complicated and possibly far worse.
So, definitely. But I do think I appreciate the fact that it is sort of aimed at a younger audience, but it does tackle a bigger subject.
I think it's aimed at their parents
For
too.
sure.
Like
Yeah.
the kids are going to go back and watch this when they grow up and be like, wow.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And
How
again,
about you talking?
on the more shallow level, I'd say it kind of has more of the kind of clever moments that we appreciate out of Pixar without being pop culture references or anything like that we really didn't get out of, like, say, Brave.
It's got a really nice visual shorthand for the way our brains work,
Yeah.
which must have required a lot of thought.
Yeah.
So is this a bounce back for Pixar? I don't. People have been worried they've been stretching.
Corey, it's had?
I mean, I didn't even really like the movie.
What?
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. Please tell us why.
And
And then tell us why you're wrong.
Hashtag coming out.
It is, yeah.
I just thought that the way that it dealt with the abstract ideas by making them concrete made it all very kind of like, this is this is that, and when these, like, as concepts, it's very emotional, but when those emotional scenes happened, I felt absolutely nothing. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what Bounce Back is or isn't, because they've got a couple sequels in the pike. They just had their first flop. I think The Good Dinosaur didn't even cross
The
100
thing is,
million.
I preferred The Good Dinosaur emotionally for some reason. And
but
I'm not sure why, but it did.
Because you're a simple man and you like simple things.
But that's the thing. I don't think it's supposed to be for everybody.
No.
Right?
No, not
No.
necessarily.
And that's where
Yeah.
I think it has value, but it's not going to be top.
Look, at the end of the day, if somebody
Right.
watches it and it hits them, then it hits them. But
For
for me,
sure.
it was one of those things where it just, like, I understand it all, but,
Okay, so
but yeah.
if we don't have strong feelings about moving on, our number 3 film was had 104 points, was mentioned 15 times, was the top choice of 3 people, including Corey Pierce, and it's Ex Machina. Maybe we can start with Corey then, why you loved this film.
Well, first, on the very base level, I think people are going to see this in a few years, and with the cast, it only has like 3 people essentially. You got Oscar Isaac, Domhnall Gleeson, and Alicia Vikander, and think of how much they've already done, like in this year, and how much they have coming up. Like, it seemed when it came out like there was just like 3 random people, but now it's kind of like.
Has anybody had a better year than those?
Yeah,
two?
seriously.
Yeah, really.
I mean, come on. But more than anything, it just had a full-on kind of the whole package of. It was like both intellectually stimulating, but also kind of purely kind of entertainment. It was both cinematic, but it could feel like a play at times, and it had both like all the stuff that I like about Danny Boyle's movies, as far as kind of like it's both slow but kinetic at the same time. It's so strange, and it all has a slight bit of a sense of humor, and it's also very rewarding on rewatches, and so not much more really could compete with that. As much as I wished repeatedly during the year that something would kind of replace it, nothing ever did.
Anyone else watch?
Yeah, I saw it. I think this falls into that category, talking about themes for the year, of there's no longer the female that needs a male to save them, is a theme I kind of thought all the way through the year, and this falls into it as well. Like, as it's going along, you think, okay, what's going to happen is he's going to have to save her to get her out of this thing, right? But she didn't need saving. She had her own plan, what she was going to do, and didn't need anyone else to help her to get out of her situation.
Or was she even a woman?
Yeah, that's
Well,
exactly what I was thinking.
Are we talking about a woman in
But I guess
Well, she was
projecting
Visually,
that visually.
she was, and also in terms of the way that the male characters treat her, right?
Yeah.
They treat her kind of like property in a way.
Absolutely.
But this is the great part about Ex Machina. Like, it makes me question what that constitutes gender. Like, is just the physical factor?
It's been the question of the year, right?
It's a terrific film. Like, it has a level of depth that you don't see in most films, particularly about the extension of. Again, I'm gonna say the obvious, but to what degree artificial intelligence makes a person, and what makes a person, and what makes a human. I really dig this film. I think it was in my top 10. Nothing bad to say about it. Alex Garland is a great writer.
He's a very
When he can write an ending.
He's a very meticulous, sort of exacting guy. I actually got a chance to interview him, and I mean, he's very sort of precise and doesn't sort of suffer fools. And I mean, it was really sort of this is my vision, this is what I'm telling. Either go with it or don't. I mean, he really had sort of an almost borderline arrogant way to separate himself from the work he's done with Danny Boyle and sort of make himself stand out on his own and I mean, this is a label that he hates, but that's like sort of an auteur of his own.
But it's a very independent film. I think it won a bunch of awards in Britain.
Well, it dropped in the middle of April. Like, it almost came out with like not a whole lot of fanfare. It made very little box office. It's a movie that a lot of people are catching up with now, with stuff like iTunes and Blu-ray and
it's one of those ones that
It's on Netflix.
still managed to hold on. Like, when the Blu-ray came out, it was still in theaters. People were still going to the theater when it came out on Blu-ray. So it's one of those ones that didn't necessarily blow up, but it's sustained.
Did they have a festival premiere?
Yeah, wasn't that South by
Sundance.
Southwest? No,
South
It
by
was
Southwest.
South
Southwest.
by.
Yeah, Southwest.
South by this year. Oh yeah, this year.
I know.
Yeah, what they
somebody
did,
who's-
how I heard about this, was a South by Southwest, and what they did was they made a dating profile.
For her.
That's
For
right.
her.
Yeah, on,
And
That's
they ran a dating profile, and people were interacting, thought she was real, and was setting up dates and stuff. And that's I heard about this. Yeah,
That's really
Well,
good.
that's the first time I've heard of a South by Southwest premiere film
Yeah.
showing up this highly at the end of the year, which is great. I think that's great.
It's one of these movies that gives me hope that studios will release stuff in the first half of the year that's not utter crap, and with the belief that it will hold on, because that first 4 months of the year is just a wasteland.
But I mean, again, it's like a $20-25 million movie that they shot in 3 or 4 weeks, so it's not something that they're putting a lot into or worried by at the very least.
Well, it's the best kind of movie. It's where the script is important and the performances are important, and the rest of it is.
No, but I think like this movie is visually stunning.
yeah.
It's,
But
like,
I mean,
it's
but if it
visually
didn't have
fascinating,
anything
right?
You had nothing to think about.
You
It
could
was just another-
easily
It's not a
drop this movie
$300
like
million
last
film.
week and have it
Demographics,
really hard
yeah.
in awards consideration, but for whatever reason, its studio thought, and just dropped it into the early part of the year, and yet here we are in January still talking about it.
What I love is that this cast. I mean, obviously, makes this film in a way. Too.
Oh, sure.
Oscar Isaac's fantastic.
Well, Vikander may be nominated for these as opposed to the Danish Girl, which
She could
I
potentially be
appreciate
nominated for
that.
both.
She's up for both, yeah, theoretically, yeah.
I hope it's better. I mean, I much rather her performance here than in the Danish Girl.
I liked her in both, but like this is more clearly a supporting part, whereas in the Danish Girl she's very clearly a lead. So that's the thing. Like my thought is if if she's going to get a Best Supporting nomination, it's for Ex Machina.
This doesn't seem like an Academy
No.
film to me at all.
No.
And sometimes
it's like
that's
a Children
what
of Men
happens.
kind of like
Yeah.
cool
Yeah.
independent movie
I don't
that.
think that the
you know.
older voters are going to kind of click with this at all, but
Yeah.
who knows?
But one thing more to interrupt just on this, because you're talking about the question of the year. It's only more kind of like a subtle thing in this movie, but I think the real question of the year to me is like about what makes something a home. And Ex Machina, it's more about like the fact that it's all kind of distant and remote and what that kind of does mentally to everybody there. But whether it's in Room, whether it's Brooklyn, whether it's in Spotlight and like the office being kind of like a shared family and home, and Inside Out about having to find a new home and re-find yourself. And even very subtly in Mad Max, I guess, given just the very basic plot point of where it comes and goes to, I think is more a matter of just challenging where you feel comfortable, where yourself, where all the people you care about, and where you grow as a person is.
Yeah.
And to me, that was what the year was all about.
Sure.
And that could even apply to gender too, because where are you more home than and how you feel comfortable with yourself, right? So
Yeah.
But you didn't like the ending. You didn't like the ending of Ex Machina.
oh, I love it.
Oh, you did.
I maybe would
Sequel!
the nitpicker in me might say, well, how's she going to charge her battery? But that's not that important, I guess.
Friend is believing.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Let's move on to number 2. 120 points, 21 mentions, 2 first place votes is Todd Haynes' Carol.
Are either of the first place voters here?
No.
Heidi, did you see Carol? Crap. And you, I know, saw it
did.
and you like it.
I liked it because visually I thought it was a stunning.
But you just think
stunning
it's only
film.
so-so.
I like the acting in it was great. I think I put it number 3 just because
Okay.
I think that as a movie it was put together exceptionally well. Did I resonate with the characters as much? Maybe not, but they were both so well acted and the film was just so good looking. I couldn't ignore it.
The reason why I circled around to you and Heidi first is because on my own year-end podcast, we kind of tripped over something that Carol may be the kind of female movie that males are gravitating to more than women and thinking that there's something there that may not be. Because we had a panel for the 2 women there didn't really care for it, the guys loved it, and I'm starting to kind of seek that out and kind of coming upon the same conclusion that it was, with women, it was just okay. And it's kind of making me wonder, I'm
That's
like, is this the kind of movie that guys are gravitating more towards to make themselves feel good of, oh, look, I can be a feminist too.
I agree with that.
I'm not drawn to it.
Well, I think what's strange is
think
it's,
so.
it's Todd Haynes, who's a gay man, who
Yeah.
can, obviously tell the story of being an outsider a little bit, but maybe isn't able to.
But that's
Well,
not the same thing. It is a female novel. Like it's written by
Yeah.
Patricia Highsmith and it's
Yeah.
adapted by Phyllis Nige. So it's the writing is Nige. The writing is there, the direction is not there, and that may slant things just enough.
That's what I'm saying though. Like if the direction.
Oh, you say- okay.
Is not. If there's something that he's missing in the material that he's not able to.
Tap into.
Yeah, and maybe that's.
It was
just-
the love story wasn't as solid, like solidified for me.
Maybe.
That's
Corey's
think-
chomping at the bit
Well,
over
I
there.
think, and this was something that James and I spoke about earlier before we came here, but it's a movie that actually I think I watched it and I didn't have a very strong emotional reaction to it, but I felt like it was the kind of thing where once I watch it again, I will be able to, because I'll be able to sink more into it. Part of the thing that I loved about Carol, and actually the number 1 movie that we're going to talk about, is that it's a movie of like very fleeting moments. So you just get these like sort of almost half out of focus shots, or like there's a lot of visual moments in the movie that stick in my brain even after seeing it just one time. And it's the kind of thing where the romance would come through in that rather than in the story necessarily. And
I would agree with that. It's not
I look
necessarily
forward to seeing
meant
it
to
again.
sort of hit you over the head with it and have it play in sort of the offbeats as opposed to sort of hit you over the head with it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, both are valid. That's why, I loved Brooklyn, and Brooklyn is a much more direct, straightforward kind of romance, and this is sort of the other end of it. Yeah.
I find that for a movie about passion, it's a very cold, clinical film.
But it's in a time where they
was gonna say that.
they can't be
That's-
that
yeah, that's
passionate.
kind of the
like
point, though.
when they
That's-
get into that motel room, it's kind of like all bets are off, right? That is by far the most intense scene in the whole movie. Spoilers for Carol if you haven't seen it. But that's like the only moment of really, really charged passion, because the rest of the time when they're in, that hotel restaurant, or when they're in that diner, or certainly when they're at her workplace in that Sears and Roebuck, they can't be that overt. It's 1952, and while, it's not exactly a new thing at the time, it's not socially accepted.
So I haven't yet seen Carol. Going to see it this week. But has anyone seen Brief Encounter?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
There's-
the feeling I think I would.
It's
get
in there.
from it.
It's like, and the first scene will remind you of that movie.
Yeah, that's.
Has
that's
anyone,
important, yeah.
everyone here's watched Mad Men?
Yeah.
I'm sure. And like, Mad Men's dealt. well,
Well, okay, but wait a second.
the thing is, Mad Men's kind of dealt with kind of the kind of closeted persona thing with numerous characters, including one named Carol.
Sure, which is 10 years after the events of this movie, and so much changed in the span of the 10 years Mad Men takes place. We can't discount that. That's not fair.
Regardless, but discounting the other way is that Mad Men to me did it with a lot fewer minutes, and like with side characters.
I like how they capture that very quiet time, though. The quiet time in there, that early 50s time.
Yeah, but I don't. When it comes down to like what you're saying about passion, is I agree. Is just that it kind of comes down to that I felt like the chemistry between them wasn't all that strong, and it's not just a matter of like I actually agree that on paper that there should be like a barrier to let them be who they really are, but I actually at the same time kind of feel that a lot of movies will use kind of a lot of silence and stares as a way to sort of let you project what you're feeling or what you think that they're feeling onto the characters, rather than what I think comes more naturally to me, which is actually having kind of mundane conversations, and you see what kind of the ways that they see the world.
Yeah, and I'm all for that. I'm all for the silence and let me fill it in.
The kind of silence thing, like
it's very lost in translation in that way.
yeah, but I love Lost in Translation.
Oh, okay.
I just think that Sofia Coppola kind of can put that across a little bit better, and I think it kind of comes like with the textures in which she uses her music and some of those sort of or other things and I think that in those situations I'm doing the projection myself. In the case of Carol, over time I was like really enjoying it, like purely visually, like for a long time. But it was just I'm one of those sort of like almost like, all right, give me something else eventually.
Right. I think.
Where sorry, I just want to finish.
Yeah,
this.
go ahead.
That by the end, I kind of got like, and the final scene is considered one of the highlights of the year for so many people, including I think Bob over there, is waving his hand. And for me, it's just like by the time it got to the end, a lot of those kind of long glances, it started to feel like watching the riff tracks for Twilight, where like they're making fun of me going line, and that's what I felt about Carol by the end. I was very kind of frustrated that it didn't kind of go beyond a sort of simple fascination, which I don't think makes a good romance.
Yeah, that it's interesting because that I think you pinpoint sort of exactly what the movie's doing, which is what I liked. So it's like we saw the same thing, you know what I mean? But that I didn't sense a serious passion in the movie. It was much more a curiosity from Rooney Mara, and then Carol is a bit more of an enigma, but she's also kind of not the main character.
Yeah.
But to me, that's kind of that's why that final shot to me was so incredible, because actually for much of the movie, I was expecting it to go in a certain direction, and then when that final shot hits, and you understand kind of a character discovering herself in that moment, which is all wordless, but it's that's kind of what hit me.
Yeah. I think with the case of Carol, and even some of the other things we talked about, increasingly the last couple of years, I find that if I don't necessarily like something, I don't have to find a way to find that everything else is wrong with it and pick it apart. Carol's just one of those situations where it just didn't connect with me, and so what?
And you're thinking like this is like, kind of like what Hillary said. This is a handsome movie, if nothing else, that you enjoyed your time with, but it didn't emotionally resonate with you.
And thing is to talk about also The Revenant, and Malick movies, which you've argued about in the past, that I think a lot of movies that have a lot of silence that where like it leaves a lot of on the viewer to project, if someone is willing to project, and I love Sarah Polley's movies, which involves a lot of projection too, I think. If you're able to project and it makes it better, then wonderful. And if you don't, then oh well, something else will come along.
I feel one detail on Carol. I think the part I enjoyed the most actually, because I was not invested in the relationship, was Sarah Paulson doing Patricia Highsmith.
Yeah.
That was kind of a nice little detail I sort of enjoyed most of the time, but that was exceptional.
I mean, I think for me, I was more invested in the curiosity between the two than more than the actual overt passion that was potentially there. And I mean, it's not only, I mean, I had it ranked pretty high, and I mean, I think one thing that still kind of bugs me a little bit is how Hames has made this, but he's also basically made the same movie a few years ago in Far From Heaven.
Yes.
Much better, I think.
I feel like this more Far From Heaven was more of a direct remake.
Yes, yeah.
You know, where with one big old change to its central narrative, whereas this one feels more like something original. The other question that came up on my show is, would we feel the same way about this movie if it was an older guy going after a younger girl, or if it was two men? Because there's something somewhat predatory in a older female who's married and established and has her own children going after somebody who's 20.
Yeah, but isn't that
That's
part of
most of
but-
Woody Allen movies. Over the last.
Well, there's that, and that's the thing. A lot of people come away from Woody Allen with, oh, he's doing the same thing
Yeah,
again, and aren't we beyond that now? It was one thing in 1970. It's not the same thing in
Yeah.
But that's
2017.
also part of the movie.
Of course it has,
Yeah.
but are we still there? Or are we not past that now?
But I mean, again, that almost plays to another theme that we're getting in a lot more in movies, especially this year. It's neither of those characters were particularly likable. Like, there was necessarily a hero or a heroine.
I'd go for a beer with Therese.
No, but they just were. They were. There wasn't necessarily a clear-cut hero protagonist or a villain or something you like or you don't like. They're just there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The villain in this is kind of Kyle Chandler.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
And that just their kind of mentality towards a lot of indie filmmaking.
Yeah.
And I consider myself generally more indie-minded.
Right.
But it's the kind of thing that has made me feel more and more that TV is better than movies. Because, like, TV is the place where characters talk to each other.
They can also be there over a much longer period.
Yeah, exactly, and that's much better for
Granted, people
for being about
Would you have
relationships.
would you have dug this more if it was a 6-hour version where we could have got more into them
absolutely.
and had them talk a little bit longer?
Absolutely.
Okay.
People complained about Don
This was the
Draper
last
on
appearance of the
though,
Corys
so-
of the Cast, but...
Okay, now actually we're going to move on to our number one film, and everything you just said, we're going to turn that on its head, because it's a very interesting contrast between the number two film and the number one film. Our number one film of the year, with 131 points, 16 mentions, 4 first place votes, was Mad Max: Fury Road. Definitely villains, definitely heroines and heroes, and
Witness! Okay.
and
But-
not a lot of subtlety, I'll say. So, I don't know. No one here chose it as their number one, but
I think I had it as my number 2.
Yeah, same.
I had it down at 4.
Is there anyone here who didn't have it in their top 10?
Half the table.
Oh, yes,
Wow.
a lot. Yay. Thought I was the only one.
All right. Well,
I literally just watched it the other day for the first time because it was something that was just not in my interest.
But
Shall
it
I
was
say?
99 cents on iTunes.
But it was 99 cents on iTunes,
That's why I
so I
watched it.
totally went for it,
They got
and yeah, that was the reason why I watched it. But it was also because there's so much awards talk of it actually right now. I was like, well, I guess I better watch this because it's going to be in there somewhere. But yeah, just like the visuals were stunning. Like it was cool, but it's just not my thing.
And had you seen any of the other Mad Maxes before it?
No, to be fair, I have not.
You don't need to.
No, and I was going to say, I think that might be where a lot of the love is coming from, is it is so radically different
Right.
than everything that has come before it, that the idea of, oh, here comes another Mad Max film, here's another franchise that they're trying to dust off, and this was the product. I think that's the thing. I think a lot of people were
Was
just,
that what anybody thought of that, though?
that it was another franchise film that they were trying to dust off
George
and
Miller
reboot.
working on a movie for like 12, 13
Not a lot of
years?
people knew that, though. A lot of people who loved this film, who went out and saw this film, didn't
Maybe.
know that it was 15 years in the making.
I feel like it was understood that it wasn't like Warner Brothers was like, we need to revive Mad Max. It was just kind
They're
of
out of properties, man. They're 3 years post Potter now. They need properties that they can drive.
What I mean
no
is
pun
if
intended.
you read a lot of the reviews, a lot of them aren't just surprised that it was good. A lot of them are surprised that the movie exists, which is not the same. Like when a Star Wars movie comes out, people understand that that's going to happen when, the 5th iteration of Spider-Man eventually happens.
Because those are the franchises that we're tapping into right now. Everything is fair game. Everything that was once popular, they will reboot and rebrand and reboot again if it doesn't work.
Including Point Break.
Basically, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
And they're not. I mean, they're not going to make a Spider-Man movie where Spider-Man barely has any dialogue.
It's called Civil War, but sure, okay.
Corey, do you think that that influenced critics positively? That they're like, oh, there's a new Mad Max movie. That's a good thing in itself. Or were they...
Maybe. I just think that, never mind that I thought it was incredible in its own right. I think that a lot of the positive vibes around it are because it's a movie that's like $100 million movie financed by a studio that is completely unlike anything else at the theater. Narratively maybe very simple and everything, but just in terms of what you're getting out of it, visually, the effects work, everything about it is so unlike the norm that plays into what is surprising about it. Mad Max is in that realm anyway. I mean, the last one, Thunderdome, is like a bizarre movie.
Which was the last time he got a budget. The first two were made for nothing. The first two were borderline grindhouse movies.
Yeah.
And then they gave him money to do Thunderdome, which is so abysmal that they just said, yeah, you're done now. And what did you say? It's okay?
Penguin movies,
all right.
go ahead.
No, it's not.
He made his bones doing pig movies.
And
Part of me
Dance
thinks
Penguins.
that if this made Avengers money, it wouldn't have had everyone going to bat for it in the critical.
It couldn't have. It was rated R. You're not going to get a rated R movie making Avengers money
Yeah.
when you leave everybody.
Well, I mean,
underachieving
let's
out.
not say Avengers money, but let's say at least more relative to kind of like a Django money.
Maybe, but I mean, people are going to bat for Star Wars, and it's about ready to overtake Avatar. People are all losing their hats about how it's a great movie in its own right. I don't know that the box office has a whole lot to do with it. It's a hit. It is an unqualified hit that just did enough. Now, I know that you're not crazy about it, so you may chime in as well.
Both Star Wars and Mad Max are movies that I both liked, but also kind of felt a little kind of overwhelmed by. And maybe overwhelmed and underwhelmed, I'd say.
Sure.
And I'd say it even applies to Ultron from this year, which I think was more, like an actual disappointment to people, especially since they had something to compare it to that was very recent.
Critically and financially,
Yeah.
actually.
In the case of all of them, and even a lot of kind of more run-of-the-mill action movies, I find that even in the case of Mad Max, which went out of its way to try to be as practical as often as possible, when you get to things like the fast-forwarding kind of stuff at the beginning and just how beautiful it looks, is that when you have kind of so much action, when you have things kind of going so kind of over the top, it can be overwhelming and cartoony to a point where after an hour, I'm full. And then the rest of it is almost kind of like, this even applies to like the Captain America movie that I really loved from last year, and I kind of almost have like a 40-minute stretch where I think I'm absorbing all the actual plot points, but I feel kind of glazed over where my ability to sort of have highs and lows disappears and it all becomes kind of a plateau. And then ultimately I end up kind of leaving the theater feeling a little bit numb, and you'd kind of prefer to leave the theater feeling like high or low. A lot of movies kind of have start and end with like a really big point like that.
Yeah.
So
And-
it's visually too loud.
Yeah,
But I thought it
and
gave you a
with Mad
break.
Max, I so much wanted to love it. Like, that was the trailer that was just like, holy shit, this is like cool as hell. I censored myself.
Corey,
It's not my show. Go ahead.
All
The
right.
first half an hour
Um,
doesn't even give you a pause.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
And so, like, you really are.
The
kind of
whole
left
2
going,
hours doesn't give you a
Well,
But,
it briefly
No,
sort
they-
of.
they take a
give you
breath now and
There's
then.
a break
Yeah.
when she goes to find her home, right?
But it's
Yeah.
it's not an overt breath at the same time. I mean, I think almost sort of opposite to your point. I loved that I was overwhelmed. I loved that it was a studio movie, more or less, that had the guts to overwhelm me and not play it safe in certain spots and hit those certain beats that you'd expect. And it just kept going and going
Thing is,
and going.
I love gore and intensity, but when I think what the kind of gore and intensity that I love, when I think of the 3 hours I just spent last week, and I know you don't like it, with Hateful Eight, there were parts where I was early on was kind of a little bit bored, but when the kind of gore or extreme moments are kind of happening and they're just like pouring in, like the intensity of it sticks out. But when things are kind of going fast and crazy and are intense, and they're spilling like that, like it's harder for me to absorb it. It all just kind of comes off like kind of 300 pixelated blood.
Heidi, you had a thought?
No, I was just saying I found the Go 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 too tiring, and it's probably similar to what you both say, the overwhelmed and then underwhelmed. But I like intense. I like to have a good time, but I found like the volume was just too high all the time.
Yeah, it's storytelling.
Sure.
For myself.
Yeah.
Sure.
Volume meaning action.
Yeah.
Sequences, this and that. I think I didn't know where to look at times because so much was happening.
Yeah.
But I still had a great time. Right? So, but it wouldn't be a top 10 for me.
I'm with Devin. It's like I agree. I like being overwhelmed. I really do because I so rarely am. However, I needed more story about Mad Max. I really did. Like the universe building was great.
Well, if anything, it suffers from the fact of the title of Mad Max because Max is there.
Yeah.
He doesn't say a lot.
He never does.
He's not even
That's
a main
not new. He barely ever say, like, you know, Mel Gibson was not exactly what you'd call verbose.
But again,
early on,
in the
right?
other movies, at least from my perspective, like he never had anyone strong enough to play off of. He didn't have like there wasn't a Furiosa in any of the other movies, and even with Thunderdome, Tina Turner, who's just horrible. But it's just
It's also Tom Hardy. Anytime you get him into a movie, you know he's not there to be loquacious, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of a guy Hollywood has handpicked to mutter. He's you know, Mickey from Snatch personified.
well, that's why they made Legend.
Basically, yeah, right? You get one of them that you can understand, and then the other guy, you're like, wait, what? It makes me really wonder for the next Christopher Nolan movie. I don't know. It's in a year where we also got the Terminator franchise dusted off again by the same studio to bring back Mad Max and have it have half a brain in its head and find a nice marriage between practical effects and digital effects and, take the movie away from Max. I was surprised in a time where it's really hard to surprise me with a commercial film. And that, I think, carries it a few marks higher than what I would have just given it automatically if I had it. The next one now has a very high bar to clear.
Oh, I would certainly say that it's above the bar for anything else like it. I think I'm just kind of realizing that sort of thing is becoming less and less for me.
Sure.
When a blockbuster that I kind of grew up with, more like Jurassic Park, like when things are going crazy, it's not like, oh my God, there's 10,000 things happening at once, like non-stop. But things kind of moving into that kind of zone for me, it does start to get to kind of like a video gamey kind of zone. And I think if I were to like rag on anything more than this, I would go back to Avengers Age of Ultron, where and it comes down to intensity, where it's like you can have as many different things exploding on screen at a time, but just the actual content of that happening, it doesn't automatically mean intensity. It's a matter of like when you watch a Western and you hear like a really, really loud shotgun go off versus 10,000 guns going off at once. Yeah, 10,000 guns going off at once, if you were experiencing it yourself, would be far, far worse than hearing one shotgun blast. But in presentation, like an old school Western, hearing one shotgun, like amongst a sea of quiet, is way more effective. And I think that's just kind of where we've reached with blockbusters, and even the good ones are falling victim towards this. And it was only something more like, I know you're a Furious, Fast and Furious fan, and I didn't even really appreciate it this year, but I think the fact that Fast and Furious, I'd say way more even comparison to Mad Max is inherently very silly in some ways, but it's not kind of winking at you, whereas Furious 7 is. And I think when you have like a sense of humor about yourself, those action movies kind of go down easier with me because they get more variety.
That's fair.
But with Mad Max, when it's kind of taken more seriously, it becomes kind of part of the getting numb, where you don't have something, you don't feel like there's something that's going to kind of come and upend you and surprise you again. I feel like I've seen everything after an hour.
Hillary, are you with him? Where blockbusters are concerned, are you feeling like we're getting a little bit too numb by all the sensory overload, or was there another blockbuster this year that kind of, or is that something that you're growing out of, or was there another blockbuster this year that hit you a little harder than something like Mad Max?
Well, I mean, I love Star Wars.
Which is the one, which I'm kind of surprised that didn't come up at all.
It was on my top 10, so
all the movies that would have,
I loved it.
and all the blockbusters that would have entered our top 10. Never mind number 1. I'm surprised that in some ways that Star Wars didn't.
Yeah,
place
I was
higher.
surprised by that too. But
It
I mean,
could be
there's a
just
lot
later
of
in the-
dialogue in Star Wars. There's a lot more for me. Like I love.
So you want more of a marriage?
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious too about the so-called feminism of Mad Max. I heard so much about it earlier in the year, and I didn't see the movie until a few weeks ago. And I was sort of disappointed. I was like,
Yeah.
oh sure, there's a woman where there used to be a man, but they're supermodels. For
Well,
crying
also
out
Del-
loud.
Yeah.
They actually
It was
literally
kind
have
of
a supermodel.
Guillermo del Toro brought up that it's really ironic, for lack of a better word, that you've got a female protagonist in the center, but it's such a butch-looking female. That it's such a, like
It's
you
not.
could... No, but you...
There's an argument out
She
there.
has a
No?
shaved head. She's wearing, like...
Oh sure, but you know what? She's not. She's a
fair
beautiful
complaint.
woman with a shaved head.
It's
And a
very
mechanical
it's
arm.
And a
it's a
mechanical
no-win
arm, and she's half
situation.
robotic, and she's driving
and
a
then
diesel
the rest
tank.
of her ensemble are all basically half-dressed supermodels.
That are not doing nearly the heavy lifting that she is.
If
Not a lot of
you're
heavy lifting in the movie. Basically, it's an action.
Sure
movie.
there-
There's
no.
dramatic.
if you're a very butch kind of personality like that, you can face the criticism that you're some sort of a male idealized version of what makes a tough woman. But if you're the other, like say in video games, like a Bayonetta, who flaunts their sexuality,
Or Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
yeah, you might get criticized as being like a quote Mrs. Male, or
Yeah.
not Mrs. Male, but I mean like that you're, like like a piece of objectification. Like
Sure.
if you retain any part of your femininity, there's someone that's going to criticize you. If you're too butch the other way,
Yeah.
you're going to get criticism.
Well,
it's
Em-
like
Emily
really
Blunt
unfortunate.
was-
Yeah.
Emily Blunt and Sicario was a good kind of marriage between the two, right? Because she
Yeah,
was
like-
still.
But
see,
And Edge of
she
Tomorrow,
gets-
she's an even better
But then
one.
I felt
yeah.
that she got kind of like run over at the end of that.
Well, there's that, and they
Well,
also they pick
yeah.
on her at one point. They're
Yeah.
like, "You haven't showered in 3 days. You're
Which
wearing
is
the same
ridiculous.
T-shirt."
That's a ridiculous scene.
Uh,
That's
I-
the one
well,
scene in
there's-
that movie
I'm-
where I'm like, that's not.
I
true.
almost want to say it. I'm like, you're looking at the same person we're looking at, right?
Right.
Even if
Yeah.
you're saying that she hasn't done A, B, and C,
Yeah.
but it's the same thing. She
Yeah.
kind of has to butch it up to be.
But even the
taken
questions they ask her when they first recruit her, I'm listening to ask those questions and going, they'd never ask a guy those questions.
Nope.
Never.
Yeah.
What they're asking.
Well, I'd say, like, for example, we're talking about blockbusters. No one here has probably Hunger Games even close to their top 10. I know you didn't like
Nope.
it very much. Thing is, I'm someone who didn't care for the first one, but I came to really respect it over the last couple movies. And the reason why, I'd say, is that as ridiculous as the Mockingjay movie was in the fourth version in some of its aspects, is that in comparison to Mad Max and even Star Wars, especially after the big spoiler moment, which we won't get into, I guess, for sake of one or two people, but Katniss Everdeen sits with PTSD, and she's not weakened as a character by being PTSD. She's not like a sad sack female hero. She's dealing with something horrible. She's hurt by it intensely. She's scarred, but she's still following through and being a hero anyway. She hasn't run away. She's followed through with it. And you compare that to like some of these other movies where major characters and friends die, and they're just on to the next thing, and or that it doesn't affect them whatsoever. And to me, that kind of almost like dehumanizes them and turns them into that video game or cartoon character, where it becomes harder to relate to Furiosa or relate to various Star Wars characters, because I want them to actually sit back and bathe into what actually happened.
See, but you mentioned that, and for me, the shot of the year is Furiosa on her knees in the desert, just wailing in grief because of everything that has just come before her. And it's both a striking image and an image where you've got this person who I've just said is very, very male, very butch, and just letting her emotions run loose almost in the middle of this fracas.
It's weird that I've seen the movie 3 times and I don't even remember that scene.
I got nothing. It's the first breath. It's what we were saying. Like it doesn't take a second to breathe. It's the first breath after all that action.
I don't know. I think it's interesting that you don't remember that image because it was like it's used on posters.
Still,
I think, too.
yeah.
It's one of the. It's the one where she's like just in the desert screaming.
Or maybe
after
it
she
just seems
finds
so
out-
kind of typical of action movies to do.
Maybe
this.
I think that, and it was the reason it was my number 2 of the year, and I wrestled with putting it as my number 1 was that, George Miller basically looked at the state of blockbusters and was like, looking at what you're talking about, just everything is overload and all that, but nothing makes an impact. You don't get like startling images, you don't get anything, and he kind of looked at it and said, I'm going to make a movie that's even faster, has even more shots per second, has even crazier stuff, is even louder, and has an even more stripped bare plot, like barely a plot. If anything, too many of these movies have too much plot. There's like a million things going on and you can't follow any of it. And he's just like, no, it's going to be as simple as humanly possible. We're not even going to have a script. It's just going to be storyboards. And by focusing on those visuals, I have from shot to shot images of that movie that are, stuck with me. When I watch it, I anticipate those shots. and the way that the movie will have some insane action scene with a million different things in theory happening, but shot to shot, you're seeing the moments that matter.
Yeah.
And it's just, to me, the virtuosity of that kind of filmmaking. Whereas I watched the first 20 minutes of Age of Ultron the other day, and that opens with one long tracking shot, which in theory should be great because you're like, oh, cool, I can see the geography of everything, and it looks like garbage.
So things look so real that they don't look real. It's like a new level of uncanny valley that we're getting into, I think.
Yeah, I don't even know what was going on in that scene. It's dark, it's ugly. The way that the camera moves doesn't make any sense.
Everything looks so crisp and photoreal, but you don't have the little things like the dust and the dirt.
So to me, that was the thing.
Bring it
With,
unphotoreal.
that was the thing with something like Mad Max, where ordinarily a movie like that might not rank so high because the emotional reaction, it's not like some big beautiful emotional movie, but the sort of impact of it was very, very strong on me.
I think a little thing that would have made a big difference for me, this is just turning into a straight up Fury Road review, is just like there's so little I don't think I see things that change in character even over the course of that movie necessarily. And I think the one character that really supposed to represent that is the one War Boy.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he is like a completely brainwashed, blah, 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 blah. And his transformation over to the other side is just so quick that it just becomes another kind of like you're playing Diablo and someone's decided to join your fight and you've got a new playable character. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, I don't know if I completely agree. I think stuff is seeded in there, but I think it comes down to the intelligence of the filmmaking. I mean, that was when I put together my top 10 for this. What would get one movie in and out? Like even Star Wars is an example of this, and I don't think it's a perfect movie by any means, but
you think it's a good movie?
I think it's a very good movie, and I think that there's an intelligence with which it's made to hit a lot of the different points that it needs to hit that are not easy to do, and it gets there. And my number one movie of the year was a movie called Get, which is an Israeli movie, and that's a movie where every single shot of the movie is so purposeful, and it's still an entertaining movie. That's what it comes down to for me.
Yeah.
That brings me to we're going to wrap up.
Yeah.
I think what I was going to do was ask everyone if there's a film that wasn't in the top 10 that affected you. It could be your number one that we didn't talk about. It could be something you're surprised didn't hit the top 10. So Corey, you mentioned Get. You can say a little bit more, and then we're going to
yeah, I mean, it's a movie about it's set in Israel, and it's about a woman who's trying to get a divorce from her husband. And in Israel, marriage is handled through religious courts, which gives the husband all the power, and he refuses to give the divorce. And there's a protracted court proceedings over 5 years, I think. And the whole movie is set within the courtroom, so it just won't cut from year to year. And it's just an extraordinary movie. I think it's on iTunes, so if anybody looks it up on there, just incredible piece of work. Yeah.
Want to go this way, maybe?
Yeah, my number one was Traitors. Saw that at Fantasia this year. And very odd film. The theme is with the financial crisis and times, people losing their money in homes, you can either lose your money slowly or die slowly, or you can take your chance and die right away or maybe get ahead. So rules are set up, and basically you put all the money that you own into a duffel bag, and you find someone in the same level as you, and you fight to the death, and you dig a grave before, the winner takes the 2 bags and goes away.
Wow.
And now they have more money, they can keep going up the ladder, and we follow this one guy who's very timid at first, and just grows and gets better at killing, and just as he marches his way up the chain to the top.
So it turns the financial crisis into a literal fight.
Mano a mano to the death.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
Actually, my number 4, Good Night Mommy. That movie, I found.
That movie's fucked up.
It absolutely is, but it had such a good time in quotation marks. In the sense, I was actively cringing in my seat. I think that's a good sign if a horror movie gets me. It's like popcorn Haneke. This is that.
It's a good description.
I like that.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, it's a couple of kids, twin boys who are in love with their mom, at a cottage in the country. Mom has had this plastic surgery, and the twins suspect that might not be their mom anymore. And the way it tackles the psychology of the twins is so interesting. The first half, and then the second half, it becomes really hard to take. I had such a good time in the end, because I mean, in the end, you go out to see a horror movie to be horrified, and I was. So it was mission accomplished.
I just want to say quickly, that was a Colin Getty's pick 2 years ago at TIFF, and Vanguard is now where Midnight Madness used to be.
Yeah.
And every time I get my book, the first place I go is to Vanguard and see what's in Vanguard now.
They call it Midnight Madness's older, cooler sister.
Basically.
Yeah.
I had a better. You know, a couple of years ago they had When Something Meets Something.
Yeah.
And I called Vanguard where Art House meets Fun House.
I like that. Yeah.
So
Always go to Vanguard.
Yeah, it's a great program.
Yeah.
Always start there first.
It's true, I moved from Midnight Madness to Vanguard.
Yeah, always start there first. Best movies in there.
Heidi?
Well, my second choice would have been Men and Chicken, who I think,
Oh man, Chicken is so much fun.
Vanguard too, wasn't it?
I think it's part of Vanguard, and I like the absurdity. It's about three strange brothers, and there's some genetic stuff going on that we're taken by surprise. And I think I was taken by surprise at how much I actually enjoyed watching this absurd story. But at the same time, it is about familial relations and how they can drive each other crazy, and it's just sort of enacted in a really, really interesting way. And quirky humor. I think for me that's where it's at. So yeah, I had a really good time with that one, and I think I saw it on the list for a few people. So it's good to see.
And it hasn't even had a theatrical release here. So.
But
Something to look forward to in 2016 then.
Yeah.
Draft House actually purchased the rights.
That's right.
Oh, nice.
Nothing for you?
Oh,
You had room.
I'll wrap up. Yeah.
All right. I guess I'm going to go for a bit, so don't rush me. But from a general standpoint, I think the thing that I'm loving the most, especially about this year, is the fact that we're actually debating issues of quality in these $100 million movies. And I mean, for a table full of film nerds, that doesn't often actually happen. Where as much as we love them and will appreciate them, we wouldn't be necessarily caught dead putting them on our year-end list, but we've hit that point where there are certain franchises and there is the chance for quality in studio movies, be they $100 million movies or $25 million movies, for like actual quality to hold up and come out. I mean, there are certain movies that I thought at the beginning of this year, if you had said you could have put Magic Mike XXL and Point Break in the same category. Magic Mike XXL is not a bad film. It's actually a fun movie.
It's a great movie. It was in my top 10.
Point Break
Best
2.0
movie of the
is
year.
a train wreck.
3 or 4.
But
For me, that was Creed as well. If you had told me they were dusting off Rocky again, I would have been like,
There you go,
seriously?
yeah.
Creed is the best episode 7 of the year.
I'll give you that. Yeah,
I
sure.
will say my surprise that Creed didn't crack our top 25.
Right.
I thought it would. Magic Mike XXL is 24.
yeah.
But I thought Creed, with all the discussion, I thought it would have ranked a little higher.
And I mean, just in terms of my favorite of the year, I absolutely loved The Big Short. I was surprised that Adam McKay could make a movie that was this sort of ballsy and brave and sort of more or less tell the truth. And I mean, ultimately, I think it suffered just because it came out before Christmas and not enough people saw it, but it is absolutely a fantastic film, and I loved it to death.
That was my number 2.
Yeah.
Big
Yeah,
Short.
it would have been my top 10 if I had seen it in time. It's almost like the John Oliver's Last Week Tonight, the movie.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
For me, as much as I would also like to shout out to Peanuts movie, The Martian, and Paddington, all successes
Paddington.
within their own
Yeah,
genres.
yeah.
The highest rank for me, not brought up, is Mistress America.
Great,
Oh,
great.
like
yeah.
that.
And I've come
You know
to
a lot of people who hate that movie and a lot of people who
I don't
love
get
that
it.
movie.
People
I
are
appreciate Noah Baumbach more every year. I think after Francis Ha, While We're Young seemed like a bit of a severe shift.
Which was
but I
also
think,
this year.
Yeah, but
big
I think
year,
Mistress
man.
America actually, I rewatched both the other day, and I think they both kind of jumped up for me in unison. Mistress America, number one is just that Greta Gerwig is just a complete comic powerhouse. I mean, for all the power that someone like Melissa McCarthy has out there, I think in indie circles that Greta Gerwig is just like fantastic and can play like a version of the same character, but always just seems so kind of natural, off the cuff. She's that middle ground between like kind of like a Jennifer Lawrence and a Maria Bamford. It's like that weird. And all the supporting cast and the thing makes it have a shift towards being this bizarre farce that you don't see
Screwball.
anymore. Yeah,
Screwball.
but it still resonates as kind of real people that you know, which I think Noah Baumbach has really kind of tapped into more of an Alexander Payne zone of you can see the love for the characters as well as the sort of disdain that is often criticized in there. And Mistress America just felt so warm and lived in, especially on rewatch. So I couldn't recommend that one enough.
Nice. Hilary Butler.
I have to echo Dave and say that The Big Short was just amazing and was definitely high on my list that didn't make it, unfortunately. But I guess the other one that kind of got some mixed reviews, I loved Steve Jobs just from the script alone.
really,
yeah,
Aaron
absolutely,
Sorkin was,
yeah.
like, his script was
Our
brilliant.
bartender's clapping. So.
I can say The Big Short did finish 16th, and Steve Jobs finished 17th.
Yeah, so
they
it's
were-
it's in there, but yeah, I wish it had been a little higher, and I wish people had given it maybe a bit more of a warm reception and a watch, because I think a lot of people missed it, and it's really unfortunate that they did, because the way it was set up and the script, it was brilliant.
I feel like that's one that's going to come back in the new, like in this little spring that was spring winter that we go through, where it's a lot of award bait kind of movies that you get a lot of those get a new life.
Yeah,
in
well, John's
cinemas.
came out in that October glut where like everything came out at once.
Everything came out at
True.
once, and yeah, it was not quite staged up properly.
Yeah.
So I feel like they'll kind of give it another push if it gets
Yeah.
some nominations. For me, the one that we didn't bring up, it was my number one of the year, was Clouds of Sils Maria, which I know a lot of people had as like a 2014 TIFF. Our bartender's clapping again. The movie does a lot of things in a very short amount of time, and having Kristen Stewart express, well, not just be good.
Like
Because
her
he can be
movie.
I
cast.
was gonna say, I actually really feel like we're gonna see a lot better things out of her now that she's done with Twilight, because I feel like she's a lot better than what Twilight gave her to do, and the fact that she kind of cheekily gets to comment on a lot of that and on a lot of who she was for the last part of this decade, while not seeming like a whiny little twerp about it, is like that's really great acting, really great direction, really clever writing. And it's a movie that does a lot of things in a very short amount of time, and I kind of hope that's one that people catch up with as time goes on.
Rumored Criterion this year,
Ooh, nice.
which is why it's not on Blu-ray yet.
It's part of the
It's on
IFC.
Netflix.
Score.
So I get the last word, and I'll mention another film that didn't get a ton of love, but I think most
Spectre,
people
right?
saw it.
Spectre?
No, Tangerine.
Oh,
yeah.
Which did finish 21st, but only 4
Great.
people mentioned it, but they all loved it. So if you can catch it, it was a Sundance movie last year. It's
on Netflix now.
Yes.
really on Netflix, a really sort of small budget. It was shot on iPhone 5s.
Played at Fantasia too.
Played at Fantasia. It's just, I don't want to like categorize it as about something which will make people think it's a certain kind of movie. Just see it. It's very good. It's funny. It's kinetic. It's kind of heartbreaking and heartwarming at the same time. That's all I'm going to say.
It's the Citizen Kane of transgender
No,
transgender
now
sex
you're giving
sex
it
worker
no,
Christmas movies.
I don't want you to put it into a category. See, that's probably why. I
And
like
See,
it's-
just
and
the
it's
fact
short.
that just the fact that you drop that name and the whole table is like, like that should
but
tell
if
you something.
Tell people like what it's about. People will be like, I don't think I want to see that.
I would just say, just watch this.
It's short. You have no
Pretty
excuse.
crazy, hilarious, awesome movie.
Should we mention the
Yeah.
guy who made 6 movies this year? Should we get his name out there just to say, or
Who made 6 movies this year?
So no.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. Well, you know that actually, Love and Peace.
I'd tag in my top 10.
Finished quite high as well, 14th for a film that I wasn't aware of. So I know it was at TIFF, but did it get theatrically released?
Don't think so.
So anyone who saw that really loved it, and he made a bunch of other ones too. So good for him. All right, thank you everyone. I hope we didn't go too long. You'll be able to hear this very soon, and hopefully follow us along. Cast is a group of lobby loiterers. We're on Twitter at casts
Underscore TOR, yeah.
TOR. There's a website
Coming,
this
yes.
year, and hopefully we'll talk to you again before next year.
And thanks to all the sister sites who will be hosting this podcast, which will be up, I guess, as you're listening to it as we speak.
Right on.
Thanks for listening.